When you hear the word detachment most people think it means indifference or emotional coldness, but that's not true. Detachment is not about shutting your heart off, it's about learning to protect it. It's the point where you stop confusing tolerance with love. When you detach, you're not saying, I don't care anymore. You're saying, I care, but not at the cost of my dignity. And that is a powerful shift. You see, when you love without boundaries, you slowly start to disappear in the process. You begin to silence your own needs, hoping your consistency will make them see your value. But human psychology doesn't work that way. The more you bend, the less they notice you're breaking. The more available you become, the less space there is for appreciation. It's only when you step back, when you quietly reclaim your energy, that people start to notice the silence they once took for granted. Detachment teaches emotional discipline. It reminds you that love is not a transaction, it's a reflection. What you give should not come from fear of losing someone, but from a stable sense of self. When you detach, you no longer operate from anxiety, you operate from clarity. You start making choices not to please, but to preserve, and that preservation is where real confidence grows. So, detachment is not the death of emotion, it's the birth of balance. It's the point where you stop trying to be understood and start understanding yourself. Because when you learn to stay centered, even in someone else's storm, you no longer need control, you become it. Remember this, detachment is not love lost, it's self-respect found. The more you chase someone, the faster they run, not because they don't want love, but because constant pursuit removes the thrill of being chosen. Human psychology is wired to value what requires effort. When everything comes too easily, we subconsciously begin to take it for granted. This isn't arrogance, it's conditioning. We are drawn to mystery, to the feeling of earning someone's presence. And when that sense of pursuit is taken away, attraction begins to fade. When you chase, you're not just following a person, you're communicating need. You're saying, my emotional stability depends on your response, and that energy is heavy. It suffocates connection instead of deepening it. A woman can feel when a man's attention comes from fear rather than confidence. The irony is, the more desperately you try to keep her close, the more she starts searching for an escape, not because she stopped caring, but because she stopped feeling the polarity that once drew her in. True connection grows in space, not suffocation. When you stop chasing, you allow curiosity to return. She starts wondering where your attention went, what you're thinking, and why your energy suddenly feels grounded instead of desperate. That curiosity reawakens attraction, not because you manipulated her, but because you reclaimed your balance. This is the psychology of respect. People don't admire what they can easily control. They admire what remains calm under pressure, what refuses to beg for love. When you step back, you give both yourself and her the chance to feel the difference between genuine connection and emotional dependency. So remember the moment you stop running after someone, you give them a reason to turn around. When you stop explaining, defending, and constantly trying to prove your intentions, something powerful happens. Silence begins to speak louder than words ever could. Most people underestimate the impact of withdrawal, but emotional detachment forces reflection not just within you, but within the other person as well. When you no longer react, you remove the drama that once fed the cycle. You create space, and space is uncomfortable for those who have grown used to your emotional availability. When you detach, you shift the entire dynamic. Instead of trying to control how they see you, you allow reality to reveal itself. Your absence becomes a mirror. She starts noticing the quiet. The validation she used to receive from your attention disappears, and she's left to face her own behavior without the constant reassurance that kept her comfortable. That's the beauty of detachment. It replaces noise with awareness. This is where growth begins for both sides. You begin to see clearly what was real and what was only a projection of your attachment. She begins to realize that attention is not infinite, that presence has value. The silence that once felt like punishment becomes the most honest form of communication because it shows what words can't. Most people fear silence because it exposes truth. But truth is exactly what relationships need to evolve. When you stop chasing clarity through conversation and start creating it through distance, everything becomes visible intentions, priorities, and patterns. So, instead of filling every gap with words, allow the silence to teach. Because when you no longer react to chaos, you transform it. And in that transformation, one truth becomes clear. Asterisk, asterisk, sometimes your silence will fix what your words never could. Asterisk, asterisk, sometimes you need to disappear to be seen. That's the paradox most people never understand. When you're always present, always available, your presence loses its meaning. It's only through distance that value becomes visible. Think about it: when something is constantly within reach, the mind stops recognizing its worth. But the moment it's gone, the absence creates awareness. Detachment, therefore, isn't rejection, it's revelation. It reveals who truly values you and who only valued your accessibility. When you pull back, you don't just create distance, you create contrast. The quiet space left behind allows others to feel the energy you once brought effortlessly. And in that contrast, they begin to realize that your presence wasn't just convenient, it was stabilizing. You don't have to prove your worth when your absence does it for you. Distance exposes what words often fail to express: your importance, your boundaries, your individuality. This is why detachment is so powerful. It gives people the opportunity to experience life without your constant emotional availability. And in doing so, it reveals what was genuine and what was habitual. Some people will drift away, that's clarity. Others will move closer with renewed respect, that's connection. Both outcomes serve you. In truth, your value doesn't grow in proximity, it grows in perspective, and perspective can only be gained when you step back. People often confuse presence with love, but real love thrives in understanding, not attachment. So when you choose to withdraw, do it not out of anger, but awareness, because the ones who truly see your worth will not need your constant presence to remember it. Always remember this: asterisk, asterisk, your distance doesn't diminish your value, it defines it. Asterisk, asterisk, you can't lead from a place of emotional dependence. The moment your peace relies on another person's approval, you've already surrendered your power. Detachment isn't about walking away from love, it's about walking back into your strength. When you learn to control your emotions, you stop reacting and start responding. You stop giving your energy to situations that drain you, and you start directing it toward things that build you. That's where emotional mastery begins, not in control over others, but in control over yourself. When you detach, you begin to feel something different inside you: calm, not because you stopped caring, but because you stopped fearing. Fear is what makes people chase, cling, and lose themselves. Love rooted in fear is never stable, but love rooted in peace becomes unshakable. That's why detachment reconnects you with your power. It silences the noise of insecurity and brings you back to emotional clarity. You start realizing that you don't need to argue to prove your point. You don't need to beg to be understood, and you don't need to overextend yourself just to be seen. Your energy begins to feel different, grounded, steady, magnetic. And that energy speaks louder than any words ever could. It's the kind of power that can't be forced, only felt. In this state, people respect you differently. They sense the calm in your tone, the quiet certainty in your presence. You no longer chase validation, you embody it. So when you feel the urge to overreact or overgive, pause, breathe, remember who you are without their approval. Because the truth is, asterisk, asterisk, real strength isn't loud, it's the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs to prove their worth. Asterisk, asterisk, once you detach, everything changes, not because the other person suddenly becomes different, but because you do. Detachment resets the entire dynamic. It brings clarity where confusion once lived. You begin to see what you were blind to before, how much of the relationship was fueled by effort rather than connection, and how often you mistook intensity for intimacy. When you detach, you stop trying to fix things that were never yours to fix. You stop chasing emotional validation and start observing patterns from a distance, and from that distance, truth becomes visible. The beauty of detachment is that it rebalances the energy. When you pull back, the other person has no choice but to adjust. They either rise to meet your new standard or they fall away, and both outcomes serve you. You no longer engage from need but from choice. You stop measuring your worth by their attention and start measuring it by your peace. That shift alone transforms the entire relationship, because respect always follows self-respect. People sense when your energy changes. They feel the difference between someone who needs them and someone who values themselves. When you detach, your silence starts doing the talking. You communicate boundaries without confrontation. You teach through your absence what words could never express, that your love is deep, but not desperate, available, but not guaranteed. And here's the truth most never realize. Detachment doesn't destroy connection, it purifies it. It removes fear, control, and dependency, leaving only what's real. That's when love becomes genuine again, when respect returns naturally. So remember this detachment isn't the end of love, it's the beginning of self-mastery. Because once you stop needing to be chosen, you finally become impossible to replace.